Hello, everybody. You're reading with Jimmy. We're reading part 2 of 4 parts of Guy de Maupassant's The Horla. Thanks for tuning in. In the face of this simple reasoning by the monk, I fell silent. This man was either a sage or a fool. I could not have said which, but I held my peace. For what he had just said, I had often thought. July 3rd. I slept badly last night. There must be a feverish influence at work here. My coachman is suffering from the same trouble as myself. Coming home yesterday, I noticed his curious pallor. "What's the matter with you, Jean?" I asked. I can't get a good night's sleep anymore, monsieur. My nights just eat into my days. Since you went away, monsieur, it's been like that all the time. The other servants are all right. However, I am terrified of it taking hold of me again. July 4th. It has taken hold of me again. All right, my old nightmares have come back. Last night, I felt somebody squatting on top of me, pressing his mouth against mine and drinking my life through my lips. Yes, he was draining it out of my throat like a leech. And then he got off of me, satisfied, and I woke up so bruised and battered and exhausted I couldn't move. If this goes on for many more days, I'm certainly going away again. July 5th. Have I lost my reason? What happened last night is so peculiar that my head reels just to think of it. I had locked my door, as I do now every evening, and then, feeling thirsty, I drank half a glass of water, and I happened to notice that my carafe was full right up to the crystal stopper. After that, I went to bed, and falling into one of my dreadful slumbers from which I was roused about 2 hours later, by shock more frightful than I have ever experienced before. Imagine a man who is stabbed to death in his sleep, and he wakes up with a knife in his lung, with a death rattle in his throat, covered with blood, unable to breathe, on the point of death, and incapable of understanding what has happened to him. There you have what I felt. When I had finally come to my senses, I felt thirsty again. I lit the candle, went over to the table on which my carafe was standing. I picked it up, tipped it over my glass. Nothing came out. It was empty. It was completely empty. At first, I was utterly mystified. And then all of a sudden, such a terrible feeling swept over me that I had to sit down. Rather, I collapsed into a chair. And then I jumped to my feet to look around me. After that, I sat down again, frantic with fear and surprise, in the face of the transparent carafe. I gazed at it with a fixed stare, trying to find an answer to the riddle. My hands were trembling. Somebody must have drunk the water, but who? I myself, perhaps? Well, it could only have been myself. In that case, I was a sleepwalker, unknown to myself. I was living a mysterious double life, which makes us wonder whether there are two creatures in us, or whether, when our mind is asleep, some alien being, invisible and unknowable, takes control of our captive body, which obeys the other being as it obeys us, or even more readily than it obeys us. Oh, can you understand my dreadful anguish? Who can understand the feelings of a sane-minded, wide-awake, thoroughly rational man as he gazes in horror into a glass carafe, looking for a little water which disappeared during his sleep? I stayed there until daybreak, not daring to go to bed. July 6th. I'm going mad. All the water in my carafe was drunk again last night, or rather, I drank it. But did I? Was it I? Who else could it be? Who? God, I'm going mad. Who could save me? July 10th. I've been carrying out some astonishing experiments, and I am definitely insane. And yet, on July 6th, before going to bed, I set out on my table some wine, milk, water, bread, and strawberries. Somebody drank. I drank all the water and a little milk, but the wine was left untouched, as were the strawberries and the bread. July 7th, I did the same experiment with the same result. On July 8th, I cut out the water and the milk. Nothing was touched. On July 9th, I put out the water, the milk again, but by themselves, taking care to wrap the carafes in white muslin cloths to tie down the stoppers, and I tied down the stoppers. Then I rubbed my lips, my beard, and my hands with black lead, and then I went to bed. The same irresistible sleep took hold of me, followed shortly afterwards by the same horrible awakening. I hadn't stirred. The sheets themselves were not marked. I rushed over to my table. The cloths wrapped around the carafes were still spotless. I untied the strings, quivering with fear. All the water had been drunk. All the milk had been drunk. God Almighty, I'm leaving in a few minutes for Paris. July 12th, Paris. I obviously lost my head these last few days. I must have been the plaything of my fever imagination. Unless I really am a sleepwalker, or unless I've fallen into one of those well-authenticated but unfathomable influences known as suggestions. In any case, my terror bordered on madness, and 24 hours in Paris have been enough to restore my mental equilibrium. Yesterday, after doing some shopping and paying a few calls, which put fresh life and spirit into me, I ended up the day at the Théâtre Français. They were presenting a play by the younger Dumas, and his lively, powerful mind completely completed my cure. There can be no doubt that solitude is dangerous for active minds. You know, we need to be surrounded by men who think and talk. When we are alone for any length of time, we people the void with phantoms. So I returned to my hotel in high spirits, walking along the boulevards amid the jostling of the crowd. I thought somewhat contemptuously about my fears and suppositions of last week. When I believed, yes, believed, that an invisible being was living in my house. How weak our minds are. How easily they are shaken and troubled as soon as they are confronted by a tiny, incomprehensible fact. Instead of coming to the simple conclusion, I don't understand because the cause escapes me. Instead, we promptly imagine terrifying mysteries and supernatural powers. July 14th, Bastille Day. I went for a stroll through the streets. The fireworks and the flags filled me with childish pleasure. Yet, it's really silly to be happy on a set day by order of the government. The nation is a stupid herd, alternating between imbecile acceptance and savage rebellion. You say to it, enjoy yourself, and it enjoys itself. You say to it, go and fight for your neighbor, and it goes to fight. You say to it, vote for the emperor, and it votes for the emperor. You say to it, vote for the republic, and it votes for the republic. Its rulers are just as stupid, but instead of obeying men, they obey principles, which can only be ridiculous, sterile, and false, by reason of the very fact that they are principles. That is to say, ideas, which are regarded as certain and immutable, and in this world where nobody can be sure of anything, since light and sound are both illusions. July 16th. Yesterday I saw some things which have deeply disturbed me. I was dining with my cousin, Madame Sable, whose husband is in the command of the 76th Light Horse of Legion. At her house, I found myself sitting with two young women, one of whom is married to a doctor, Dr. Parent, who devotes a great deal of time to nervous illnesses and the extraordinary phenomenon produced by recent experiments in hypnotism and suggestion. He gave us a lengthy account of astonishing results obtained by English scientists and the doctors of the Nancy School. The facts he put forward struck me as so peculiar that I confessed I was a complete skeptic. We are, he maintained, on the point of discovering one of nature's most important secrets on this earth. For she undoubtedly has far more important secrets out there among the stars. Ever since man began to think, ever since he learned how to express and record his thoughts, he has been aware of the existence, close beside him, of a mystery impervious to his crude, imperfect senses, and he has tried to compensate for his physical incapacity by the strength of his intelligence. And as long as his intelligence remained in a rudimentary state, this obsession with invisible phenomena took crude and simple forms, that is, the explanation of the popular notions of the supernatural, the legends of wandering spirits and fairies, gnomes, ghosts. I would even say the legend of God as well. For our concepts of the artificial creator from whatever religion come to us are really the most uninspired, stupid, unacceptable inventions ever devised by a terrified brain. Nothing could be truer than Voltaire's dictum. God made man in his own image, but man has taken his revenge in kind. However, for just over a century now, we seem to have had glimpses of something new. Mesmer and a few others have set our feet on a new path. And especially in the last 4 or 5 years, we've obtained some astonishing results. My cousin, who like myself was very skeptical, smiled. Dr. Parent asked her, "Shall I try to put you to sleep, madame?" "Yes, if you wish." She sat down in an armchair, fixed her with a hypnotic stare. The doctor did. I, for my part, felt suddenly uneasy. My heart was pounding wildly and my throat contracted. I saw Madame Sibel's eyes grow drowsy, her lips tighten, her breasts rise and fall. When within 10 minutes, she was asleep. "Go behind her," said the doctor. I sat down behind her. He put up a visiting card in her hands and said, "This is a mirror. What can you see in it?" "I can see my cousin," she replied. "What is he doing?" "He's twisting his mustache. And now?" "He's taking a photograph out of his pocket." "Whose photograph is it?" "A photograph of himself." She was right. That photograph had just been delivered to me that very evening at my hotel. "What is he doing with the photograph, in the photograph?" "He's standing with his hat in his hand." She could obviously see things in that card, in that piece of, we're going to stop there. 3:25. We're going to stop there. Don't forget that. I apologize for the phone going off. This is Jimmy. You're reading with Jimmy. This is part 2 of the Horla. We're reading the entire text. Tune in for part 3. Thanks, Jimmy at readingwithjimmy.com. Jimmy at readingwithjimmy.com is my email. Look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks.